In the kitchen, craft is everything. An ounce more, a minute less can make all the difference. Yet, as a Michelin-starred chef, I know my own work is only ever as good as my ingredients. And in this series, I'm teaming up with the Balvenie to meet the extraordinary craftspeople supplying produce to some of the finest kitchens in Britain. Along the way, I'll be sourcing items for a celebration, bringing together the very best of British culinary craft. I'm Michel Roux, and this is the Craftsman's Dinner. Mention sparkling wine, and for most people, there's only one name that springs to mind. A hallowed region of Europe with just the right soil, the right climate, and centuries of winemaking experience. Yet for an increasing number of wine lovers, that region is not necessarily in France.
Hey, you're all right.
But in England.
So put row 12 on one side of the trailer and row 13 on the other side of the trailer.
Simon Roberts is head winemaker at Ridgeview Winery in Sussex. His wines have won a host of awards and are now regularly served at state banquets in Buckingham Palace.
Here we are. Here we are. So this is our Chardonnay vineyard.
I'm looking for an exceptional sparkling wine to serve at my craftsman's dinner. So I'm intrigued to see if wine from this small corner of England might actually rival that of the great champagne houses of France.
Now, I'm a Frenchman, so sparkling wine has to be champagne.
Well, you would think that, but actually lodged in the Royal Society in London by a gentleman called Christopher Merritt is the process of making sparkling wine, and that was actually 30 years before Dom Perignon was alleged to have invented champagne. So champagne is actually an English invention.
Zut alors!
But, I mean, obviously champagne has the name of everybody recognises sparkling wine, and certainly when my parents planted this vineyard 22 years ago, I mean, it really was very much a challenge, you know, just to have people try English wine.
Sussex is over 100 miles north of Champagne. Yet the two regions are more similar than they might first appear. Crucially, they both share the same chalky soil and moderate climate that's ideal for the grapes used in sparkling wine.
Simon, most people would think that to make great wine, it's all in the blend, but you and I know it's actually more than that. Now, tell me about the decisions that you have to take as a craftsman whilst the grapes are actually still on the vine.
Well, we believe that the winemaking process starts in January, at the beginning of the year, when we have to prune the vines. That then will decide how many grapes we produce. If we produce too many, the sugars will be too low or the acidity will be too high. If we leave it too short, then the opposite.
So loads of decisions with your sécateur during the winter months.
That's it, yeah. I mean,
and that will affect what happens in the summer months.
Basically, this will decide the whole growing season, this decision at the very beginning of pruning. So it is very important to ensure we have a good harvest.
2 weeks go by. Once the grapes have ripened, it's time for harvest. Simon brings in an army of workers to help pick over 17,000 vines. The team have just a few days to harvest the entire crop before the grapes will be spoiled by over-ripening.
Right, there they go. Is it looking clean? Looking good? Yeah. Cool.
It's a mammoth operation. Once the grapes are picked, they're taken to the winery to be pressed. The juice is then fed into vats where it undergoes a first brief fermentation. And 10 days later, the young, unblended base wine is ready for its first tasting.
When you're next going to try this, so it's been bottled in a few months, it's going to be 3 years older and with bubbles. So bear that in mind when you try it.
You're setting me up for something here, aren't you?
Well, see what you think, so.
Oh, here goes. Bit sharp, bit astringent, but that should really soften with age. But very difficult for for anybody to imagine what the end product will be, because this then needs to be blended as well, doesn't it?
That's it. I mean, we have 50 individual tanks, so we have to go through each of those, decide which blend they're going to, how much of one compared to the other we're going to add.
So that really is where all the skill is, in the blending, understanding what this is going to taste like in 3 years' time.
It's difficult because you've got to imagine it so much older, a very different profile.
The blending process is perhaps the most important part of any winemaker's craft. This subjective, human set of decisions requires the winemaker to imagine what each base batch will taste like after anything up to a further 10 years of aging. It requires both an exceptional palate and years of experience. Once blended and bottled, the wine is taken to the cellar for its secondary fermentation. It's this part of the process that gives the wine its most distinctive quality.
Fermentation, when it's finished, one of the byproducts is carbon dioxide, but it takes the wine or the pressure in the bottle up to 6 bar, so a lot of pressure.
There must be a few exploding bottles, or does that...
No, there are. So you come in the morning and you'll see wine on the floor, but we, you know, you don't want to be down here when that's happening, so...
Maybe we should be wearing a crash helmet.
We should do, yeah.
Once the yeast has turned the sugar to alcohol, its dead cells leave a residue in the bottle.
So if you look at a bottle here, so this doesn't look particularly appetising. It's cloudy, there's the sediment there, but this is what gives the wine its traditional flavours. So if you were to taste this after it just finished fermentation, it would taste yeasty. If you aged it a little bit longer, it goes into doughy and then bready. So depending on the style of wine that you want to create, depends on how long you leave it down here.
To make the wine drinkable, the sediment must be removed. The bottles are first upturned and placed in a chiller. The residue gathers at the tip of the bottle and freezes in a single plug of ice. Inside, the liquid expands, and with a little help, it's forced out in a single split-second blast. The bottles are then corked, washed, labelled, and at last, they're ready for drinking. In just 20 years, through patient dedication to time-honoured traditions, Simon and his team have helped revive a once dormant national craft. Only a generation ago, the result would have seemed inconceivable. A truly world-class wine industry in England. But before I'm certain I can serve some of Simon's finest fizz at my craftsman's dinner, there's one crucial question that still needs to be answered.
Is it as good as champagne?
Shall we try it?
Yes.
Well, the wine that we're going to try, its predecessor won the Decanter Wine of the Year award,
Wow.
which is the only wine competition to have champagne and sparkling wine together. And, well, let's try it and see what we think.
Look at that.
So this is just the Chardonnay grapes.
So just on the nose, get the same smell of fruit, rich Chardonnay fruit that I was getting on that relatively fresh juice straight out of the vat. Dare I say, it's not a champagne, but as good as a champagne.
Thank you very much.
That's excellent.
Well, I'm pleased you enjoyed it. Thank you. Good. Cheers.